On the night Thorne Industries turned 50 years old, its founder stood on his own marble floor and told a room full of guests exactly what he thought of the woman his son loved. He did not know that her father was already pulling through the front gate. He did not know that within the hour, the company carrying his name would be worth billions of dollars less than it had been at sundown. This is the story of a man who spent his whole life terrified of looking poor, and the quiet woman he humiliated in front of 300 guests, never once suspecting who had been standing in his house for 2 years. By the time the last champagne glass was set down that night, everyone in that room understood exactly who didn't belong under that roof. It was not who they thought. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Josephine Ferris stood near the terrace doors in a plain charcoal dress, watching 300 guests glitter under string lights strung across the lawn of the Thorne estate. To anyone who didn't know better, she looked like exactly what her father-in-law assumed she was, a young woman who had married above her station and had little to offer beyond gratitude. She knew which caterer's daughter was starting nursing school that fall. What she had not done, not once in 2 years, was tell the Thorne family who her own father actually was. Beside her stood her husband, Marcus Whitlow, the only son of the man hosting this 50th anniversary gala. He'd grown up watching his father measure people by the weight of their wallets, and he'd spent 2 years bracing for the night his father finally turned that measuring eye on his wife. 3 questions hung over that lawn before the first course was even served. Why had Josephine spent 2 years hiding exactly who she came from? What was Vincent Thorne so afraid of that he needed every guest at his own anniversary to see him as untouchable? And who was the man already crossing the county line toward the estate gate? A man none of the 300 guests inside had ever met, and one none of them would forget. Josephine Ferris had grown up inside a house most people would call a fortune, raised by a father who treated wealth like a loaded weapon, useful, dangerous, and never to be left lying around where it might change who you were. Emery Sutcliffe had built Sutcliffe Global Partners out of a single warehouse and a stubborn refusal to be underestimated. And he had raised his daughter with one rule above all others. If someone loved you, they had to love the actual person, not the number attached to your name. Josie had watched money turn family friends into strangers and strangers into flatterers, and by the time she met Marcus, she had already decided she would rather be underestimated than adored for the wrong reasons. So when she fell for a quiet, decent man at a conference she'd attended under her mother's maiden name, she let the lie hold. She wore modest dresses. She drove a paid-off sedan with a dent in the bumper. She let Marcus's family assume she came from nothing, and she told herself she would reveal the truth when the moment felt right. 2 years passed, and the moment never quite arrived, mostly because some quiet, unkind part of her wanted to see exactly how his family would treat a woman with nothing behind her name. Marcus Whitlow had never known a version of his father that wasn't performing for someone. Vincent Thorne had built Thorne Industries from a single leased assembly floor into a name printed on buildings across 3 states, and he had spent every year since terrified that someone would look closely enough to see the man he used to be. A supervisor's son from a mill town who'd clawed his way into rooms that were never built for him. Vincent buried that history so completely that even Marcus had only pieced it together from old tax filings. What Vincent could not bury was the fear underneath it. And fear, in a man with that much power, tends to come out as cruelty aimed at whoever looks the way he once did. Camille Thorne had married into old money and spent 30 years making sure everyone assumed she'd been born into it. She judged people by their shoes, their handshakes, their last names, and she had disliked Josephine from the very first dinner, the way people dislike a mirror that shows something they'd rather not see. She wore a sapphire pendant that night that had been her grandmother's, the kind of piece she liked to remove and set down in full view of a room, just so people would notice she had something worth removing. None of this would have mattered on any ordinary night, but Thorne Industries was 3 days from signing an $18 billion supply agreement with Sutcliffe Global Partners, a deal that would keep the company solvent for another decade, negotiated for 18 months entirely through lawyers and video calls. Not one person at Thorne Industries, including Vincent, had ever met the Sutcliffe chairman in person, which meant not one person in that glittering ballroom had any idea the deal that would save them was walking toward the front gate in a plain gray coat, and that the man wearing it had spent 2 years watching his daughter live quietly under a name that wasn't hers, waiting to see exactly what kind of family she had married into. The trouble started the way it always did with Vincent Thorne, in front of an audience. He crossed the lawn toward Josie with a drink in his hand, and that particular smile he wore when he intended to enjoy himself at someone else's expense. "A word," he said, loud enough to turn heads at 3 nearby tables. The string quartet kept playing, but softer, the way a room quiets when it senses a show is about to start. "Of course, Vincent," Josie said, setting down her glass. 2 years, he said, shaking his head like a man doing arithmetic he didn't like. 2 years you've been in my family, and I have never once heard you mention where you come from. Not your people, not your money, not a single relative who thought this wedding was worth attending. They couldn't be here," Josie said evenly. "How convenient." He raised his voice further, and guests began drifting closer the way people drift toward the edge of something about to break. "I had you looked into. Did you know that?" Quietly, "Of course. I wanted to know exactly who'd married into this family." He spread his hands, delighted with himself. "My investigator found nothing. No estate, no history, no family worth mentioning. Just a woman who married up and hoped nobody would ask questions." Marcus stepped in front of his wife. "Dad, enough. Stay out of it," Vincent snapped, not even glancing at his son. "This is my house, my company, my anniversary, and I will not stand here and pretend some database clerk with a discount sedan belongs at the head table of a 50-year-old company." He turned to Gavin Presley, hovering near the bar with a drink he hadn't touched. "Gavin, first thing Monday, I want Marcus's name off every account. The cards, the trust distribution, the condo downtown. Today he has a future. Tomorrow he can find out what it costs to marry beneath him." Gavin glanced at Marcus, then gave a slow, uncomfortable nod. This wasn't a tantrum anymore. It was a signature away from real, and everyone close enough to hear understood it. Camille arrived at her husband's shoulder, sliding the knife in with a smile. "Sweetheart, tell me honestly," she said to Josie, tilting her head. "What was the plan? Marry the son, wait out the inheritance, disappear with half of it?" "There was no plan," Josie said quietly. "There never is," Camille said, and a ripple of thin laughter moved through the gathering crowd. Phones had begun appearing low against evening gowns, small red lights blinking. Vincent raised his glass like a man calling for a toast, and the whole lawn seemed to lean in around him. "Marcus," he said, "you have a choice to make, right now, in front of everyone who matters to this family. Her or this name. Her or every dollar that comes with it. Choose carefully, son, because the second you pick that woman, You are no longer a thorn." Marcus didn't hesitate the way his father expected him to. "I don't need a second to think about it," he said. "I choose her. I'll always choose her." The smile died on Vincent's face. "Then get out," he said, voice shaking. "Both of you. Out of my house. Out of this family. You're dead to me, Marcus. Do you hear me? Dead." Josie took her husband's hand and turned toward the terrace doors, and that was when she saw it. A pair of headlights sweeping slowly up the long gravel drive, right on time, exactly as promised. Whatever came next, she was no longer facing it alone. Vincent had no idea the man behind those headlights was about to walk straight into the worst night of his life. Camille noticed the headlights too, and mistook Josie's stillness for something else entirely. "My pendant," she gasped suddenly, one hand flying to her bare collarbone. "It's gone. My grandmother's sapphires. They were right here." Her eyes swung to Josie like a trap closing. "She was standing beside me not 10 minutes ago. She reached for my arm. I felt it." "I never touched you," Josie said. "Liar," Camille hissed, loud enough for the nearest 50 guests to hear clearly. "I knew it the second she walked in tonight. Let people like her through your front door, and this is exactly what happens." Vincent's face lit with something close to satisfaction. He finally had what he'd been circling all evening, not just a woman to mock, but a thief to catch in front of witnesses. "Tobias," he called, and his head of security stepped out from the shadow of the terrace. A broad man with a careful, unreadable expression. "This woman has stolen from my wife. Search her." Tobias hesitated. "Sir, I'd want her consent before I don't care what you'd want. This is my property. Open the bag." The lawn had gone dead quiet, except for the low murmur of 300 people pretending not to watch. Josie held out her small clutch without a word. Tobias opened it slowly, almost apologetically, and turned it over in front of everyone. A phone, a folded tissue, a single house key. Nothing else fell out but a stick of gum. "Check again," Camille demanded. He did. There was nothing there. "There's nothing in the bag, Mrs. Thorne," Tobias said carefully. "Then check her coat. Check her." "That's enough," Marcus said, and a second guard caught his arm and held him when he lunged forward. "Get your hands off her. She hasn't done anything." "Hold him," Vincent said, and the guard's grip tightened. Josie caught her husband's eye and gave the smallest shake of her head. "Not yet," it said. "Wait. Your pendant is on the side table by the fountain," Josie said, and her voice carried clean and steady across the whole silent lawn. "You set it down 40 minutes ago when you fixed your earring. I watched you do it." Every head turned. A footman crossed to the marble side table near the fountain, and there, glinting under the string lights, sat a coil of sapphires exactly where Josie had said. He lifted it and held it up so the whole crowd could see the stones catch the light. For a long moment nobody spoke. Josie had been accused, searched, and paraded in front of 300 people, and she had been right the entire time. Vincent did not apologize. Men protecting a story they've already told rarely do. "That proves nothing," he muttered, though the certainty had drained out of his voice. She could have planned to take it later. "People like her always have an angle," Camille added, but even she sounded less sure now. Vincent stepped close to Josie, close enough that she could smell the bourbon on his breath, and lowered his voice to something almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "I am going to make sure you leave here with nothing," he said. "No husband, no name, no future in this town. You picked the wrong family to climb into." Josie looked up at him without flinching. "No, Vincent," she said. "You picked the wrong woman to humiliate." Something flickered across his face for half a second, a draft moving a candle flame, and then he laughed it off, waving a hand at the crowd like a man performing confidence he no longer felt. Behind him, unnoticed, Tobias's earpiece crackled to life. He pressed 2 fingers to his ear, listened, and his expression changed entirely. "Sir," Tobias said. Vincent ignored him, still glaring at Josie. "Sir," Tobias said again, sharper this time. "There's a car at the front gate. A man's asking for Mrs. Whitlow by name." He swallowed. "I think you're going to want to see this yourself." The tall front doors opened, and cold river air rolled across the lawn, guttering the nearest string lights. The quartet stopped mid-phrase. 300 guests turned toward the entrance as one. A man walked in without hurrying. Older, calm, dressed in a plain gray coat, with no tie, and nothing to mark him as anyone in particular. He moved the way people move when they have never once been told to wait for anything, his eyes sweeping the lawn slowly. The guards, the emptied clutch, the sapphires still held aloft, and finally, his daughter standing in the middle of all of it. His face, until that moment perfectly calm, went cold in a way that made the whole glittering party suddenly feel very small. He crossed to Josie, rested a hand on her shoulder, and she let out a breath she'd been holding all night. Camille saw a plain coat and a stranger walking through the front entrance uninvited, and her mouth got ahead of her judgment before her eyes could catch up. "Excuse me," she said, stepping into his path with her wine glass raised like a barrier. "The service entrance is around back. You don't just walk in through the—" She flicked her wrist, and a long arc of red wine soaked down the front of his coat. The lawn gasped. The man looked down at the stain, then back up at Camille, and smiled. Not an angry smile, something far more unsettling. The patient smile of a man who had just been handed the last piece of evidence he needed. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That's very helpful." He dabbed the stain once with a handkerchief and tucked it away as if nothing at all had happened, his eyes never leaving the crowd. That was when Gavin Presley went pale. He'd been half watching from near the bar, phone still in his hand, and now he stared at the man in the wine-stained coat, like he was watching a wall crack down the middle. "Oh God," he whispered. "What is it?" Vincent snapped. Gavin took his glasses off and put them back on, as if he didn't trust what he was seeing. "Mr. Sutcliffe," he said, and his voice cracked on the name. "Chairman Sutcliffe. Sir, I had no idea you were coming tonight. Nobody told us." "You weren't meant to know," Emery said. "I wanted to see this family the way they really are, on a night they didn't think anyone important was watching." "Sutcliffe," Vincent repeated, and the word seemed to physically cost him something. "The 18 billion contract. That's—" He turned to Gavin. "That's not possible. He came in a plain coat. No entourage, no. He doesn't need one," Gavin said quietly. Emery turned his full attention on Vincent, and the temperature on that lawn seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I came quietly," he said. "No announcement, no security detail, because I wanted to know what kind of man my daughter had married into." He paused, letting the word land in the silence like a stone dropped into still water. "Daughter." Every head on that lawn swung toward Josie. She stood beside her father now, steady, his hand still on her shoulder. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. Vincent's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You spent your entire evening telling my daughter she was nothing," Emery went on, his voice never rising. "You called her a database clerk who married up, You had your man empty her purse in front of 300 people over a necklace that was never missing. Did I miss anything? There's been a misunderstanding, Vincent managed. There hasn't, Emery said. I heard every word of it from the driveway. The windows were open. The blood left Vincent's face by degrees, draining from his cheeks down to his collar. He understood now, all at once, exactly what he had done. Screamed at, searched, and disowned the daughter of the one man on earth, holding his entire company's future in his hands. You wouldn't pull the contract, Vincent said, his voice suddenly thin. That's thousands of jobs. The whole plant in Kingston. You can't. I can, Emery said simply. And you've spent the last hour showing me exactly why I should. He took out his phone, dialed a single number, and said only, "It's me. Freeze the Thorne agreement tonight. Begin termination proceedings in the morning." Then he hung up, and Vincent made a sound like the air had been knocked out of him. By sunrise, the footage from 300 phones had already been stitched together and shared across every platform that mattered, captioned in a dozen different ways that all landed on the same headline. A 50-year company founder had humiliated his own daughter-in-law over an imaginary theft, and she had turned out to be the daughter of the chairman holding his company's lifeline. Thorne Industries opened that morning down 38%. By the closing bell, the company had lost more than $4 billion in value, and two other clients had quietly pulled their contracts before lunch. The board convened an emergency session that same afternoon. Miriam Solano, the chair, had warned Vincent for years that his temper would eventually cost the company something it couldn't recover from. "There's no version of this where you stay at the top," she told him plainly, "and the votes are already counted." The board removed Vincent Thorne as chief executive that day and stripped him of his seat by evening. Gavin Presley was named interim CEO. His first call was to Emery Sutcliffe, not to get the contract back, but to ask for a meeting, which was more than Vincent would ever be offered again. The legal fallout came fast and precise. Josie had not screamed or thrown anything, but what had been done to her had names in a courtroom. Unlawful detention, non-consensual search, defamation, aired in front of 300 witnesses and several million more online. She did not ask for a fortune in the settlement. She asked that the record state plainly, in writing, what had actually happened. The Thorne family settled within 3 weeks. The amount stayed sealed. The apology, entered into the public record and read aloud in a deposition room, did not. Camille faced her own reckoning for throwing a full glass of wine into a stranger's face on camera, and rather than fight a case the entire country had already watched unfold in real time, she settled with a written apology of her own. Vincent's club memberships were quietly revoked. The charity boards he'd sat on for decades asked, gently but firmly, for his resignation. The Thorne name, 4 generations deep in that region, became a punchline overnight. A clip people forwarded to each other, captioned with nothing more than, "Watch what happens at the end." 6 months later, almost nothing about Josie had changed. She still drove the same sedan with the dent in the bumper. She still knew the name of every server at every restaurant she visited, and tipped like they'd saved her life, because in her own quiet way, she believed they had. Marcus went to work at Sutcliffe Global Partners, not as a favor from his father-in-law, but from the ground floor, learning a business the way his wife had always wanted to be judged herself, on merit, never on a name. And Vincent Thorne lived quietly now in a smaller house outside town, sometimes starting an apology text to his son that he never quite finished sending, understanding too late that the only apology that would have mattered was the one he refused to give, while she stood calmly in his ballroom, asking only to be left alone. What do you think stays with a man longer? Losing a fortune he spent 50 years building, or knowing exactly the moment he could have chosen kindness instead, and didn't? Here's the part of this story that isn't fiction, even though every name in it is made up. The humiliation of walking into a room and being judged before you've said a single word, that part is real. It happens to real people in real rooms every day, and most of the time there's no chairman pulling through the front gate to set the record straight. Most of the time, the person being searched and doubted just has to swallow it and go home. So the real test in this story was never Vincent's. It was everyone else's on that lawn. The guests who watched and laughed, the ones who looked away, the ones who filmed it but never once stepped in. That's the part we actually get to choose in our own lives, in our own rooms, long before anyone with power ever walks through a door to fix it for us. I want to hear from you on this one. If you'd been standing on that lawn before anyone knew who Josie really was, would you have said something? Or would you have stayed quiet and watched, the way most of that crowd did? Be honest with me in the comments. I read every single one of them. If this story stayed with you, do me a favor and share it with someone who needs a reminder that the quietest person in the room is rarely the least powerful one. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, because we've got another story coming very soon about a family secret that took 30 years to surface. And trust me, you will not see where that one ends up. Never measure a person by the car they drive or the dress they wore to your party. Sometimes the richest person in the room is the one who never needed you to know it.